Hi, Chris Yang here for Cook the Books. I'm sitting here with one of the biggest cookbooks of the last few years, Fish Butchery by Josh Niland. Josh came through the kitchen recently from Sydney, Australia to demonstrate some of his techniques that we've all heard so much about, including a whole grilled Branzino with chimichurri. And you know what? Dave Chang and I popped in at the end to eat the results, and it was very delicious.
Oh shit.
This is delightful.
This is delicious.
Yeah, really good.
Hi guys, it's Josh Niland from St. Peter in Sydney, Australia. Today I'm going to be grilling a fish that we do not have in Australia. It's a Branzino. So this beautiful fish here that's come in whole, which is great, looking good. I'm going to set that aside for the moment because the sauce that we're going to be pairing with the Branzino, not necessarily authentic without wanting to upset anyone, but it's a beautiful version of chimichurri. The only difference I suppose with this one is we're adding some coriander or cilantro. So we're going to start with that. We're going to move all these herbs to the middle. I'm going to go straight on the board. The nice thing about these salsas and dressings is they don't need to be overly engineered. You don't need to go through leaf by leaf by leaf and pick everything down. So we've stripped the fresh coriander down into small tufts. So there's still a little bit of stem there, but nothing that can't be chopped down or nothing that won't start to break down when you start adding salts and vinegars to it. So we've got flat leaf parsley, like I said, some coriander and that fresh oregano. So if we push everything together and then get a nice sharp knife and then go through it, nice and fine the first time so that you don't have to do as much work on the second trip round. Important to cut your herbs, don't chop them because we don't want the cutting board to be green and we want the freshness of the herbs in the dressing. So go ahead, chop all this up and it just smells so good. Oregano, parsley, coriander. And then turn everything around, push it all back into place and then go again. And really, I like there being some indifference in size, because you'll find big pops and subtleties as you're eating the dish. So go ahead, once that's done, then that's all we need to do. So pull all of that together and then herbs go in and straight away into the garlic. So whole garlic, start with whole garlic with the skin on. It's a little bit of a pain, peel. But at the end of the day, it's better than the minced garlic that's in a jar and even better than the peeled garlic that you can buy as well. Just there's a certain stickiness and, you know, intensity that raw garlic has that you just can't get from a jar. So again, pull all these skins off and then grab yourself a microplane or a really fine grater, or even the fine side on a box grater would suffice. And if you are working with a coarse grater, then you can always tip it onto a cutting board and cut through it once. So get the skin off 2 garlic cloves, set the microplane over the dish that's got the herbs in it rather than doing it onto the cutting board, because what you find is a lot of the juices and beautiful oils and things that come from the garlic after grating will stay in your cutting board, which isn't great for the kids' breakfast the next morning that'll taste like garlic, or the strawberries for the dessert that'll taste like garlic. So beautiful garlic onto the microplane and then straight in on top of the herbs. And yes, there's another, I suppose, style that you could do. You could warm the garlic in a little bit of olive oil briefly, the same oil that would go into the chimichurri. So you get this warm, almost that lovely fragrance of perfumed garlic that doesn't carry the harshness of raw garlic, but I like the harshness of raw garlic. I think it's, if you're gonna do chimichurri, you should keep the raw garlic in there. And then generous with the salt, because salt makes the magic. Without salt, you probably won't pick up the subtleties of maybe the oregano or maybe it's the parsley, and the garlic won't taste as sweet as it could if you don't add the garlic. So I'm adding it in pretty aggressively. I'm giving it a good smush with my fingers, and you can really start to smell all the herbs almost come alive. So that's beautiful. The other thing, which I don't know, I think it's non-negotiable, but I'm sure it's negotiable, is to just get some dried chili. I think it's a really good inclusion. You don't have to go crazy, but you do need to feel it. You need to have a couple of beads of sweat when you're eating it. Let's go to spoon mode and then just give a little stir and pull it all together. Salt, chili, parsley, coriander, and oregano, all friends, all together. Then red wine vinegar, the best part. Again, choose a nice vinegar. If you can't find one, then of course use a basic red wine vinegar. But the quality of the ingredients that goes into a chimichurri determines then the quality of the outcome. So that vinegar goes in, and then olive oil, pretty cool. And I like to make mine a little bit looser because having it with fish, and it needs, not that our fish is not going to be juicy, but it is nice to have some moisture underneath that can kind of mix in with all the juices from the fish. So mix this together. You can always adjust with a little more chili, a little more salt, a little more oil, a little more vinegar. So best to sit just beneath where you want to be, let it all marry up and become great mates over there. And we're going to tidy up, and then I'm going to show you how to butcher the Branzino. All right, time for some fish butchery basics, a little bit of etiquette. Firstly, good pair of scissors, excellent pair of pliers, and a plethora of knives. You can go real Dexter and you can have like 15 on the bench and then do something particular for every single part, or you can just pick your favorites. And for me, these are my favorites. So I've got a chef's knife, which generally speaking with a fish like this, I won't need to use at all. Maybe won't need to use this one either, but this is the magic. This one here, by no means a brand ambassador at all, but this is a K Sabatier. So there's different types of Sabatier knives. This one's the French stainless steel knife. I've had it since I was 15 years old, and it's still as good as it was when I first got it. The thing about this is it doesn't have any flex in it. It's like a tough, durable, hard knife. So where I suppose there's a little bit of stigma around when you're processing a fish, you need this 90-degree flexible, bendy knife. It's not the case. Obviously, those who have trained in a system with a very flexible knife are incredibly efficient using that style. But for me personally, I like the rigidity of this style of knife. So choose a knife that makes you comfortable and can do the task that you plan to do. So what we're going to look at, firstly, quality points of a fish that we've purchased with the organs already removed, is that it's nice and firm to the touch. So it's not bruised, no significant softness anywhere on the fish. You've got eyes that are convex rather than concave, because we don't, even looking at somebody, one of our friends, we don't want to see concave eyes. We want to see some brightness and some vitality. You want a slight little bit of mucus, bit of slime on the outside. What that is indicative of is the slime that a fish has on the outside that protects it from pathogens attacking it, protects it from bumping past rocks and things when it's swimming. And post-capture, you'll find the slime deteriorates rapidly for the length of time thereafter that it exists. As well, it shouldn't have an odor at all. Like, it should smell as though it's just come from the water. And if it has any heightened sense of ammonia, any of those fishy kind of smells, best to probably set that aside and get a better one or a fresher one. The work that we do at Fish Butchery in St. Peter is really, the linchpin of it is that we don't wash our fish once it comes out of the water, which I think is provocative to say, because a lot of people will be like, wait, so this is the way I've always ever done it. You walk into any global fish market in the world and what you'll see is the fish getting scaled, then it gets washed, then it gets gutted, then it gets washed, then it gets filleted, and then it gets washed, and then it gets put on ice, and then you come and buy it. And what's happening here is the rapid acceleration of bacteria growth, external, internal of the fish. And you start to develop those really heightened ammonia smells on a fish, which we all refer to as fishy fish. And the only way you mitigate ammonia is through the use of acidity, which is why oftentimes you see half a lemon getting served with just about any fish product anywhere, ever. And if not half a lemon, then a hollandaise, a tomato concasse, the use of alliums and vinegars and things all throughout the Mediterranean. And you can pretty much go back centuries into French cooking, and there's usually always an aspect of acidity getting used. And I think it's delicious, but as well, it shouldn't be used as a way of masking the inevitability or already the misery of a fish that's kind of just been put through the wash. So important to keep your fish dry, and that'll aid in cooking it more efficiently, getting crispier skin, tasting some of the savory qualities of a fish, not just the sweet ones. And you'll find that its shelf life exceeds that traditional day 3 logic of a fresh fish. One dish in particular at St. Peter that we do is a 30-day dry-aged yellowfin tuna. And that's through the use of just taking a beautiful fresh fish and putting it in an optimum environment for it to remain fantastic. And during that time, you remove a small percentage of moisture from the fish. And what you find is it starts to develop all these meaty characteristics, and it's all these glutamates that start to become active within the fish. And as you get to that 30-day, 40-day mark, you could quite easily be eating beef. And a lot of you might say, well, I like fresh tuna better, and I like it, it's cleaner, it's sweeter. And yeah, that might be true on day 4, day 5, but to blanket say a fish is better when it's fresh, I think perhaps then we need to consider what freshness is. So Branzino, the way we're going to tackle this one is work with the fish with the head to you, tail away, and pop it down on the bench, open the cavity up. You can see there's a little blemish inside, and we shouldn't be worried so much about what that is, in the sense that it's the gallbladder of the fish that's ruptured, either during processing or even during capture, where it's maybe knocked in a tub. And the gallbladder is this really tiny, small little organ that carries a whole lot of bile within it. And when that pops and stains, you get this yellow-green blemish. So important to know about it and important to cut it out, because it doesn't get better when it's cooked. It's slightly bitter and acidic. So what I do is I go in with scissors and I start at the very top behind the head. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting the rib bones off the spine. And the reason I'm doing it with scissors and not a knife is because the variability of where a sharp blade goes when you're hitting firm bone is dangerous, not only to your hands, but as well, it's dangerous in the sense that you could damage the fish, which can give you a negative result in the end. We're trying to butterfly this fish, so we create beautiful surface area to get lots of crispy skin. And if you've got a big donut in the middle because you've made a bad cut, it's not ideal. So I've done the work with the scissors to create 2 little laneways to drop the knife into. Then I'm going to go in with the Old Faithful, and where I'm starting is basically at the fish's bottom, so just here. So I'm going to start with the blade angled towards the frame of the fish, and I'm just holding this belly here because inevitably I want this whole fillet to come across and lay down. So I go in just like meat mechanics, meat butchery. You're staying as close to the bone as possible, and you go across like so. And what I do is I stop there, especially when I'm trying to train cooks. What we're trying to do is we move across to the central spine of the fish, and now naturally that spine bone has like a little risen, almost like a hump. And you can't just keep going on a flat trajectory across, because what you do is you miss out on about 2 millimeters worth of flesh that sits on the other side of that hump. So it's important to roll over and then continue on. So I angle the blade back down towards the frame of the fish and then move just gently across. And I fold this over, and now I'm actually looking for my knife through the top. So I can see my blade moving down here, but not coming out the other side. If you see the tip go out, then you've gone a little bit too far. So I can go back in now, and you can see this cut has made its way through to the other side, but I'm still 5% short of having a puncture. So that part's done. Now I move back up to where I've already made that cut, and again, angling it back towards the frame so I don't lose any flesh. And I come down nice and gently, and then stop just on the shoulder of the fish. And exactly the same technique on the other side, but the difference this time is that I'll start from the tail and go back to the head. So I'm just gonna tap that lightly, and by doing that, I'm able to get a little bit more flat with this fillet. So we're down nicely, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn the fish over, and instead of working from the shoulder of the fish down to the tail, I'm gonna start now with the tip of the blade in at the tail and then draw back up, and then come out where we started before, which was where the fish's bottom is. So we go across on the frame, waiting for that little hump again, and we roll over the top. We're working away from ourselves now. And we do a little masterclass at Fish Butchery where we invite about 15 home cooks to come to the butchery. And we do a little basic class, and the technique is exactly this one. And I find it's valuable, especially on a fish this size, because it translates borders. I've personally never cut into a Branzino before, but I'm doing it now because it's not too dissimilar in size from a snapper or a flathead or a whiting that you would find in Australia. This technique is a great one for grilling on a barbecue, on an open fire, even in a pan like we're going to do right now on a cast iron pan. But the ambition is to take this big structural bone out of the fish and then take all the tiny ones out as well. So I come down here. Now back to scissors. What we want to do, snip in at the tail, then trim all of this frame off the spine, off the back fins, basically, of the fish. So I come on up here and then snip. So, fish frame. We all know about the economy of a chicken, where you buy a whole bird and then the legs get put to work, the breasts get put to work. If there's the bone left over, we make a little soup. The skin could get made into something. There's so many applications for a single bird, yet sometimes that, I suppose, energy or enthusiasm or even time isn't really considered to be applied for a fish. But if you are going to the trouble of finding yourself a whole fish and you want to extend yourself a little bit more, then I'm going to show you how to do something with these bones. So I'm going to pop this one in a saucepan and we'll come back to that one later. Now we've got a butterflied fish, and what we want to do is get just that little bit more of this cartilage out. So I draw the blade down, and you can visibly see this cartilage just sitting in the middle, and I'm going to draw down both sides and almost present it so that it's a lot easier to get. I'm going to fold the fish over and stand that cartilage up, and then use my scissors again to trim it out. So that's a little bit more cartilage coming out. Now, the head. Now there's always like, oh really, we've got to eat the head and all this sort of stuff. I think the head, to me, even if you don't want to eat it, let's embrace it being served, because that means we've gone to the trouble of purchasing a beautiful whole fish. It's in fantastic condition. There's transparency of location. There's transparency of species. So I think there's actually a lot of luxury within being served a fish with its head. So we go down, and as well, it's just really yummy. So we go in, and I'm just tapping on both sides of where the spine runs up into the head. And what I want to do is I want to just open that up. And I'm just going to pull this big tough piece of bone out, because that's stopping us from having the fish laying as flat as possible. So I get that out. And then what we have is our collar that sits on this side. I'm going to tap it with my knife to break it. And then by breaking it means more flatness. You need lots of surface area so that you get crisp skin all the way across. So I'll tap that one as well. And it's not to tap and cut the collar in half so that it's like got two little wings, but to now have some nice flatness. The other one I'll do is just behind where the cheeks are. And I'll give that a little tap, and I'll give that a little tap. And that way then, again, flattening. And I'll split this guy's mouth, and then flat. Perfect. I won't turn it over yet because that'll be the surprise at the end. What we're going to do is shorter blade. I'm going to come in, and I always have the blade of the knife angled up. And I'm separating the rib bone from the pin bone. And then blade goes underneath the rib bone, You can almost see the blade underneath, and then we're sliding across. It's not to go all the way out to the edge here to pick up all these sinews, because the insignificance of those sinews will melt away when you apply heat to it. So you don't need to go and strip the whole belly side out. All you need to do is you need to cut these 4 centimeter long rib bones off the fish and get this little stain of gallbladder that we mentioned. So you can see here this little beautiful ribs that they just slide out like that. And so there is flesh in between each of the ribs. So you can use that for a separate application of making stocks. We go and slide this and then repeat on the other side. And we take these bones out as well. Blade again slides underneath these bones carefully and comes out. Then the same at the bottom, underneath and out. So now what we have is a ribless, spineless fish, but we're still the painful part of this whole process. It's getting all the pin bones out. And there's unfortunately still no automated pin boning. Well, there is actually, but it's water powered and they're not wonderful. But there are advances in pin boning, but I think the good old fashioned way is to buy a really good pair of pliers and pull them out, because cutting them out often ends up with not as much flesh left as you would have liked. And the machine one, like I said, usually saturates the fillet with so much water that it would be an absolute nightmare to cook. So these little guys come out, and best to use your finger just to touch along the top, and you'll find those little pin bones just sitting up, and you just want to get these fine pliers. So what we do is we go along and we feel where the bone is, and firstly there it is. So I've got the plier attached to the pin bone, and let's hope I get it out in one. Basically either side, and then you pull that out, and then the same again. Find it, pull it. So that's your pin bone. Be patient with it, because when you get impatient, usually dig a big trough down the middle of the fish, and I think you get more bothered by what a mess you've made of the fish rather than how slow you are at getting pin bones out. And if you are finding that you're taking a bit of time, work on a tray set over a pane of ice so that it keeps the fish nice and cool, so that it's not heating up too much. So now from this side, we're looking at a product that, like we said, central bone out, ribs out, pin bones out. We've made little cuts on both collars, again, just so that we can flatten it out nicely. This little tail, just because I'm vain, we're gonna snip that off just because it looks nice. We've separated the top, we've made these cuts here, and then we go over, and then we have a fish that is nice and flat. So that is our butterflied Branzino that's ready for the grill. So we've got our butterflied Branzino that we've applied a lot of love and care into, and it's ready to go now. The nice thing about applying this amount of work is this is perfect now to feed 2 or 3 people, and I think you would have a delicious meal. And yes, you apply a little bit of extra effort, but now it hits the table and everybody's going, wow, this is amazing. Like I said, it translates into different fish, so don't feel like you have to rush out and go and buy yourself a Branzino specifically. But wherever you are in the world, if you've got a fish the length of this gastronome tray or this wire rack, then you should be able to apply that method to it. So what I did was I popped this fish into the fridge overnight without covering it. So no cling film, no cloth, nothing. Just leave it open. And the little fan in your fridge is going to blow the fish skin a little bit dry. And what that does is going to help us achieve a nicely burnished skin, where we've got a little bit of crispy. So oil, I rub onto the actual fish as opposed to saturating the fry pan with oil. And what I want is this cast iron pan on a high heat so that we get the temperature nice and hot, and then we can dial down from there if we need to. Salt goes on, be liberal with the skin, and don't panic, because this is a large fish and it does require a generous amount of salt. So we've got our cast iron pan on the high heat, we've got our fish lightly oiled, seasoned, and I've got this other pan here. And foolishly, I've forgotten to bring my fish weight, which is approximately 1.2 kilos, has a little handle on top. It's almost like a burger press, but very intentionally designed to sit atop of fish, so that the idea is that you get a nice even amount of heat hitting the skin from edge to edge, And as well as that, as heat rises, it collects on the stainless steel and starts to set the top of the fish so that you don't need to flip the fish over to the flesh side. Because when you put severe amounts of direct heat on the flesh of a fish, you'll find that you end up with a texture not too dissimilar from a dry, overcooked piece of chicken. So important to really put all of the heat into the skin, because the skin's what's protecting the flesh. And if you don't have that weight, use a nice heavy cast iron that's consistent with the texture of the fish that you've got. So I'll pop this in here now. And it's nice and snug. A great option is to go outside on a grill and work over some coals. It's a really lovely way of doing it. But for now, we're going to work into this cast iron pan. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit, but for now it's at a really happy temperature and we'll check on it in a sec. So it's been 20 seconds, 30 seconds of time. And so I'll lift up this, grab my oil, and then I'm going to pop a little bit of oil over just the flesh of the fish. And what I'm doing is, like I said, once the heat rises onto the base of that cast iron pan, the fat or the oil that we've added to the flesh of the fish will actually start to rapidly conduct heat on top, and you'll actually start cooking the fish quite efficiently. You'll have crispy skin, then you'll have warm, almost set fish that will then turn out onto a plate. When you're cooking fish as well, or any kind of protein, I think it's important to listen slightly to what's happening as well, because yes, you can hear oil frying, but I can start to hear a little bit of moisture, which then is an indicator that I should probably turn the heat back up a little bit. I'll take this off and we'll have a little look at it, maybe adjust the pan, turn it slightly. And the temptation is always to touch and lift and move. And if you can avoid doing that, then please try to, just because you might unstabilize a part of the fish. So better that you develop a nice crust underneath. And then when you feel confident that you're nice and crisp, then go ahead and start touching it. But for now, leave it alone. Keep the weight on top. All right, trusty fish flip. I'm gonna go in and just have a little look, just because I'm impatient, and have a little check. We're happy on that side. We're happy on that side. So what I'm looking for when we're cooking a fish like this in a fry pan, as opposed to grill bars, is crispness. You're looking for that little detail around the edge that's a little bit crispy. And you're also looking for the heat transfer. And you can see right in the center of the fish there, it's starting to actually change from translucent to white. And so the heat is actually penetrating a small gap in the seam that holds the fillets together. And then obviously being a thinner part of the fish on the bellies, you've got coloration happening on both sides there as well. I'm basically looking for the skin to become crisp. It's an indicator to turn the fish over and serve. So we're happy at the head end. Now I'm just checking this tail. We're a little bit stuck on the side of the pan. Nothing that can't be fixed. And you can see we've kept the temperature on the pan nice and hot. We're nice and loose. I'm going to just turn this slightly, mainly so that it finds a new position in the fry pan and picks up some new heat, which sounds strange, but you'll find if you move it, then you create new little areas of crispness and browning that you may not have found if you left it in the one dormant position. If it sits in the one spot, you'll get heavy coloring all around the edge of the fish because that's where the contact is. But try to pick it up and find a new spot. So again, back with my weight, just because the center of the fish still needs a little bit more time. And we said that we didn't want to turn the fish over to the flesh side. So all I'm doing at the moment, just taking the lid off, and I'm just feeling the middle of the fish, just to see where it's up to. And it's warm without feeling as if the heat's really gotten to where it needs to get to yet. The tail end of the fish is a really nice temperature, and we wouldn't want it to go too much further, but that's roughly consistent with probably another 20 seconds worth of time. And because I think the skin can take it, I'm going to increase the temperature just slightly more as well for these last remaining seconds. Also, if you're working with a saucepan as a weight on top of the fish and you find that it just doesn't have any weight to it at all and it's kind of superficial, fill it up halfway with water and that'll give you some extra weight. We have our beautiful fish. And again, we should point out, still very rare on top, but we're putting so much heat through the bottom and we've conducted warmth on top. So then by the time we turn the fish over, that heat, once it rests, will do the rest of the cooking. So I'm going to pick the tail up, but I'm not going to use the tail as a handle because you will rip it off very easily. We go in, get the slide all the way under, and then we're going to carefully pull the fish out onto the wire rack, turn this heat off, and we're just going to let it rest for a second. We haven't done any seasoning on the flesh side, which I'm going to pop a little bit on now. Now, you're probably looking at that head as being something that still needs some time. And no amount of resting really is going to get the head to where it should be to serve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the scissor in behind. I'm going to cut that off like so. And then in the dying heat of that pan that we've just come out of, we're going to pop this fish head back in just to take on that last little bit of heat. Now, no pressure. Here we go. Crispy skin, crispy, crispy. Pretty good. What we do now is we're going to find these lovely little collars because I want to articulate to the guests that we're serving bones to exactly where they are so that everybody feels comfortable, that when they dive in, they know what they're signing up for. So there's no little surprises. So we go in again, snip out that collar, and then we're going to take off the tail. And then we're going to come down the center of the fish. You could do this absolutely with a knife. I'm just finding it easier to do it with scissors. Just to also show you that it can be done a little bit simpler. Come in, move that aside, and then that head has seen enough heat. The head comes out. So we have our head, our tail, our two collars. Now this other side of the cartilage sits in the very middle. I'm going to take that out, slide out little trimmings. They can be chef bits. Thank you very much. It's pretty good. Now I'll turn the fish over so you can see the cooking. You've got this beautiful opaqueness. It's not overcooked. It's still got life. There's juices, there's fats, there's everything that's identifiable about a Branzino still happening. It hasn't turned to cotton wool. It doesn't have a big brown charred top on it. We haven't thrown a big knob of butter into the pan so it only tastes of butter. Now we've got something that tastes exactly the way it should. So we've got this. I want to take off the belly just to, again, articulate this particular cut. So I'll have that. And then this one here, I think we just leave it as a nice channel like that. Then again, we're going to take this and then we're going to slide the belly off nicely and two nice pieces. Turn this over quickly because as the fish sits on the skin, it'll drop some of its moisture and then you run the risk of losing all of the hard work that you've just applied to get the skin nice and crispy. So chimichurri tastes amazing. This is now an hour or so after making, and so it smells so good, it makes your mouth water. So this goes onto our very bougie silver plate, and we're gonna go all the way edge to edge and get all the juices, get the vinegar, get the little bits of chili, oil. If you find there's a little bit too much vinegar, add a little bit more oil or vice versa. You don't need to put half a lemon with it because there's already vinegar with it. What I tend to do as well is wait to add more oil because I like to put a little bit of oil over the fish skin when I serve it. So, version of chimichurri goes on. Now, what we want to do is I'm going to move this over so we can come front and center. And we're going to take the head and we're going to pop that right where it needs to be at the top. Then we're gonna have our collar. And I like doing this, kind of like just putting it all back together again. We go there and there. Then belly. First belly goes on, down the side. Side. And I reckon I've found just the right plate, almost, nearly fit. And then we're gonna take the tail. And just because I need to tell people that it had a tail, and we started with a whole fish, we're gonna pop it right on the end. You know, a little bit of oil over the fish, down the skin, mixing in with that dressing, and then finally, tiny bit more salt. And that's a cast iron grilled Branzino, really crispy skin, still a little bit of life left in underneath. Leave it 10 or 15% short of being cooked through, and I promise it's gonna blow your mind. It'll change the way that you think about fish. The chimichurri, if there's leftovers, put it in a jar and eat it with everything. It's gonna be great. Even avocado in the morning with your breakfast, put it on a poached egg, put it on grilled chicken, grilled beef. It's an all-purpose wonder seasoning. The biggest time kill is obviously getting the bones out and having the confidence to buy a whole fish. Just give it a crack. I mean, worst case scenario, you end up with 2 mangled fillets that you can crumb or bread in egg wash flour and breadcrumbs and then fry it up and put it on a sandwich for a fish finger sandwich. That's worst case, which is still very, very delicious. Best case is you get something that looks similar to this, and yes, it's been augmented and kind of mismatched in shapes and put back together again. But if you can get that whole flat butterflied product to a large serving plate with chimichurri underneath without cutting it or doing anything, then golden. And I think Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever event that you're doing, this is going to impress everybody. And like even just the smell of this is making my mouth water. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to give it a taste just to show that I do eat what I cook. So crispy skin, nice, sweet, white flesh that's not dry. It's beautiful. So good. And the best part of the best part is putting that flake salt on right at the end. You get that little crackle of the salt against your teeth with the crispy skin. That's delicious. You could eat that any day of the week if there's leftovers. And even if there's leftovers with the chimichurri there, chop everything up together and then pop it through some beautiful leaves, some little tomatoes, some cucumber, some avocado even, like put it all together and enjoy it as a salad the next day. It's a really good way to use it all up, take the cheeks out of the face as well. And yeah, just relax. Yes, it's fish, but try to have fun with it. Try to take some techniques away from this. And even if you use 10% of it, I think you're going to be better off. Thanks, guys.